The Dukes of Dice are brought to you by Tasty Minstrel Games, Arcane Wonders, Game Toppers, Lifeguard Dan, and listeners like you.
Welcome to the Duchy. It's time for another episode of the Dukes of Dice podcast, a proud member of the Dice Tower Network.
Coming to you from the Duchy of the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the Gateway City, St. Louis, Missouri, it's the Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board card and occasionally role-playing games. Today, the Dukes are joined by special guest Dan King, the Game Boy Geek. Today, the Dukes will review Arcane of the West Kingdom from Renegade Game Studios and Garphill Games. And then the Dukes will take a look back at their review of Fog of Love in their Dukes Double Take. And now, the Dukes of Dice.
Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. This is Sean.
And Alex.
And Dan. Take that, Alex. Take that, Alex.
Hey.
I want to do an Albuquerque off with Alex.
Wait, like right now?
No, we don't have to do it right now.
Okay.
Well, let's give them something to listen to till the end of the episode for. How about that? So stay tuned at the end of the episode, an Albuquerque off between Dan and Alex.
Are we going to do a post-credit scene for the first time in 100 episodes?
No, we'll do it. We'll do it at the end. We'll do it at the end.
Okay. All right.
Hey, this is episode 196, which we're calling. Okay, you ready for this? Everyone ready? Fog-itects of the West King Dan. How about that?
It's so bad it's good.
How about that, Baker Mitchell? Good job, Baker, for Fog-itects of the West King Dan. Wow, that's so terrible. It's good, like you said, Alex. We actually name all of our episodes with the help of our amazing Board Game Geek Guild members. We're Guild number 2008, and head on over there to help us out preparing for episodes and stuff, because we need help.
Now, look, I know there's only room to promote one Kickstarter over the course of this episode, but I don't want to waste it here, but I'm going to. It's So Dumb It's Good is also in the category of the pizza hoodie, now live on Kickstarter. It's a hoodie where you can store a slice of pizza in an insulated pouch. They need your help to get funded. It's the pizza hoodie.
Well, I'm sorry, Dan. Like Alex said, we can really only talk about one Kickstarter, so sorry, buddy.
I thought we were going to talk about that flip burrito, whatever the heck that thing was called.
Oh, throw burrito.
Yeah, throw burrito. That thing was at like 800,000 last night. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. And climbing.
How does it do that?
Because it's the Exploding Kittens folks, and they know what they're doing.
Jeez.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there looking at that, and I see that's got like 880-something thousand, and then like just below it's Tiny Epic Tactics with like 450. And I'm going, how does this happen? What is wrong with the world?
I don't know. I guess there's just a larger group of Mexican food enthusiasts
that like to throw burritos at each other.
I love Mexican food, just saying.
I mean, hey, Dan, do you love Mexican food?
Well, I live in Arizona, so I'm kind of Mexican fooded out, actually.
So we have some of it here in St. Louis, but it's certainly not. I won't make the claim that it's New Mexico or Arizona level.
Anyway, so Dan, we'll talk about this plenty. You've got an active Kickstarter right now. Other than that, how have you been?
Fantastic. It's been super busy. Even though it's the slow time of year because of the Kickstarter stuff, and now I'm getting ready for Gamma and getting ready to kick off the new 2019 season. Get ready to look at the most anticipated games, and then the season will start and boom, off running.
Well, hold on. But before Gamma, you have another con that's local to you.
Oh, I do. The Arizona Game Fair. Yeah, and you're coming, right?
And I am coming. In fact, I'm bringing not Raquel this time, but I'm bringing our daughter Mariah. She's going to be coming. Oh, so it'll be a little interesting. Mariah's an interesting cat, so to speak. She doesn't like to play games often, but when she does play games, she is happy to play pretty heavy fare, and she does really well. So I'm pretty excited. We're gonna have a good time.
Oh, good. You're coming for the whole weekend, or what?
We'll be coming out Thursday night, and then probably leaving sometime mid or late afternoon Sunday.
Oh, cool.
So,
yeah, we got to do that panel last year. I wonder if we're gonna be doing some stuff together again.
I haven't even reached out to them to let them know I'm coming. I should probably do that at some point.
That'd be nice.
Sean is a slacker. Like I get all this flack for being a slacker, and Sean is a slacker.
I am a slacker in some respects, but not in many.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
Okay. Maybe if I'm being a slacker for podcast duties, someone should pick up said slack.
I've done some of that. Anyway, hey, Gamma, I will see you out at Gamma, Mr. King.
Yes, I will see you on the exhibit floor at some point, I'm sure.
Yep. Not at a booth, because we don't have a booth, but...
Oh, you don't?
No, absolutely not.
Why?
Because we don't have a booth at Gamma for some reason that Shane might explain to me at some point. Anyway...
So where do we find... Where do people find you?
Just wandering around with my monochromatic wolf shirt.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think you should get some sort of apparatus. You know how people wear like sandwich boards, right? You should have some sort of like table sandwich.
Oh, that's awesome.
And you just have like Heroes of Viking Land set up on it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know what I mean? And you're just like, hey, you want to play this game?
That one's a little big for a shoulder-mounted table. I think like a smaller game. I'm trying to think of an alternate name for a smaller game.
Farming block randomizers.
Yeah, farming block. Yep, farming block randomizers. Coming soon to a store near you.
I'm excited for Gamma because last year I played 4 new games there, and all 4 of them ended up being like huge things for the year. One was Ganshan Clever, one was Welcome to, one was Prowler's Passage, and the other one was Chronicles of Crime. So all 4 new ones that I played there last year were all like huge hits for me and for many people.
What's Prowler's Passage? I've never heard of that.
That was my 2-player game of the year from Renegade Games. It's J. Alex Cavern.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
2-player tactical, yeah.
That's right.
Anyway, I'm hoping Gamma's as good as last year for me.
I've never been to Reno, so I don't know how that'll be, but I have heard nothing but anything about Gamma, so I don't know what I'm getting into.
Yeah, it'll be fun. I mean, the casino's really cool. They got a really awesome buffet there, and then, just mostly game store owners and stuff going to a bunch of panels and learning how to run their store, and then really for you, it's mostly just have meetings with people and go to the exhibit floor and talk to people and get some business done.
I have scheduled a lot of those so far, so I'm aware of the meetings angle. Anyway.
That's pretty much it. It's fun, though.
Yeah, cool. Well, hey, let's talk about some games we've been playing. Sean, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. I mentioned a couple episodes back that I was getting ready to play Mice and Mystics from Plaid Hat Games with Chewy. Because I had heard that it's, once kids reach like 5 or 6, it might be something you might want to try with them where you're kind of managing the rules and managing everything and kind of having them direct what to do. And so we tried it. We set it all up. We did the first scenario. And for those that don't know, Mice and Mystics, it's been around for, God, when did it come out? Like 2011, 2012?
I'll do some research. Yeah, I'll do some research while you're talking about it.
Ancient game, ancient. And it is a pretty light-ish dungeon crawl game where you are these humans that have shrunk themselves down to these little mice, and you're trying to retake the kingdom from this evil sorceress who has married your father, the king, and rescue everybody. And it's pretty cool. And there's a nice little story element. There's this nice long story to start it off, and then at certain points in each scenario, there are these story break moments that are really cool. And it's pretty light. Like I said, it's a nice dungeon crawl. It's fairly streamlined in a lot of ways, and it has a very similar combat mechanic to, say, a Descent, where as the attacker, you're rolling a certain number of dice, you're trying to get a certain number of hits, and then the defender rolls a certain number of defense dice to potentially block some of those hits. There's some cool things, like there's a cat that could show up in your mice, so a cat's really bad, and it kind of pounces around the room and attacks everybody. So I enjoyed it. I would definitely play this often with young children. Chewy didn't quite have the attention span for it. And I probably jumped the gun. She enjoyed it, but I could tell she was just kind of getting bored with it, which was okay. It was okay. We didn't wind up finishing the first scenario. She was like, I think I'm okay. I'm done. And I kind of said, I think I'm just going to kind of shelf this for a year. I did finish the first scenario, which was pretty cool by myself, solo. Sad dad. But it was cool. It was cool to see her play a little bit more of an advanced game. I was kind of having her usually roll the dice because you have multiple characters that you all control. And so I was having her roll the dice for their movement and roll the dice for combat. She was actually doing pretty good with some addition. And blocking out attacks, like figuring that out. Because I'd basically ask her, okay, what happens now? I think it may have been a little too much brain power for her all in one setting, I think. And I think that's what kind of burned her out. But I think I'll probably give it another year or so, and we'll see. But it was a cool system. Dan, have you played Mice and Mystics?
I have not. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. I played 3/4 of a game the first year it came out, way back at my first Dice Tower Con, but I was leaving for a plane, and I was a little nervous I was going to miss the plane, so I wasn't all there. But I had fun for the 3/4 of the first chapter that I played, but I haven't really been like totally immersed in it yet.
Yeah. And Alex, I think you'd like it well enough, but I think Descent for gamers like us, I think Descent would probably be something we'd rather play, or Gloomhaven or whatever. But I think it's pretty good, especially if you're going to be playing with kids. Definitely, you'd need like 8 or 9-year-olds if they're going to be running it on their own. But it was good. I'm excited to try it again a year or so from now.
Very cool.
Cool.
So that's Mice and Mystics from Plaid Hat Games.
Dan, what's been crawling across your radar of late?
Well, I got in a game that I've been waiting for years for. Even back when I first started doing reviews in 2013, I went to Gen Con and went to a little table way out in the sea of tables, not even in the exhibit hall, by Cosmic Wombat Games, and they were showing off a game called Campaign Trail. This one on Kickstarter, and it delivered like between 2 and 3 years late. I'm going to guess it's around there. And they got a lot of flack on the forums and this and that, but it finally came in, and I've got to tell you, I was like super excited for this game, and when that happens, I get nervous because it's like you put it up too high of a expectation. This game I would say even exceeded my expectations. It is a campaign game, not a campaign like you play multiple things, but like as if you're running for president campaign. The cool thing is, I don't know, have either of you guys played 1960 Making of the President?
I have not.
I have. Shocker.
Okay. Well, most campaign games I've ever played, most of them are 2-player. This one is 1 to 6. The cool thing is like, you know, when you have multiple players, like one will play Republicans, one will play Democrats, one will play Libertarians. By the way, there's no real politics in this game. It's just, you know, the Electoral College, really. But it's really cool because you're basically trying to just, you know, be elected at the end of the game. It has an amazing score track that has all the states up on like this little like track. And you're essentially playing multi-use cards throughout the game to raise funds, to register voters, to travel around, and then drop those voters by campaigning and advertising. It is a very tense area control game that lasts 2 hours. There's 2 debates, and the debates have this really interesting mechanism that makes the game fresh and different. But the thing I really love about it is, A, it's tense the whole time. B, it's just fun. And it's a campaign game that I can play with all different player counts, which is really cool. If you play with 4 players, it's like team versus team. But if you play 3 players, you're all on your own, and vice versa, and so on and so forth. So I am really excited. They knocked it out of the park with the production. This box is like 9 pounds. It's crazy. So even though it was 2.5 years late, for those of you that are just getting it, it is awesome. So check it out, Campaign Trail. I don't see it available anywhere else though. I don't know how people are going to get in touch with it if they haven't backed it. I've seen some forum posts about it. I'm assuming they obviously printed more than the Kickstarter backers are there. So you got to think there's got to be some copies laying around somewhere that will come up for sale somewhere, but it's awesome. Campaign Trail.
And actually I looked back because I'm like, wait a second. We actually had Nathan Cornelius. You did an interview with him, Alex, almost 3 years ago around the time of the Kickstarter from Cosmic Wombat, and his brother David, I think David Cornelius was the main designer. And I definitely want to try it. So hopefully I can get some access to it somewhere.
Yeah, you should definitely take the time because it's really good. It's about 2 hours, but is it tense.
Cool.
I should note that the hot review of this game on the Campaign Trail website is from the Game Boy Geek, Dan King.
Well, that was a preview.
I know, but it's the hot review.
Yeah, well, and when the games come out that you preview, you always get nervous because you never know, like, did it get better? Did it get worse? But man, it's so good.
Nice. Very cool. Well, I'm going to talk about a game that I got a chance to play a couple weeks or so ago out at Jamie Stegmeier's game night. It's a game called On Tour. Have either of you played this game On Tour?
No, but I've wanted to because I obviously, I'm a musician and I love music and I love roll and write, so I want to play. So
I will say this, in terms of the theme being tied to music, it's the theme just isn't really there. Sorry, you have different books that have different themes, but let me talk about the game first, and then we'll get into it. This is a game that's published by BoardGameTables.com, designed by Chad Deshawn, just coming out this year, and it's a game where you are, well, it's a roll and write, and it's kind of one of these roll and writes in the vein of Welcome To, where there's, not that Welcome To is a roll and write, but everyone thinks of it as one. You have these this central piece of information, and you all have to use it differently. So what's going to happen is each round there are going to be 3 cards flipped up, and they're going to have one city highlighted and then a region. So, for instance, the East, or the West, or the North, or the South, or the Northeast. And it might have a city like, say, Boston. Well, I think it's a state typically, sorry. A state like Massachusetts, or New Mexico, or Washington highlighted on the board. And what you're going to do is you're going to roll the dice, and let's say the die roll comes up as 5 and 8. You have to write somewhere on your map on a state a 58 in one of those 3 for one of those 3 cards, and then an 85 for another one of those 3 cards. Your objective is to create the longest possible route of increasing numbers between states. So if you start at, say, a 12 and go all the way up through different states and get to a 99, you want to hit as many states as you possibly can with your band. The idea is that you are trying to plan a 100-day tour, visiting as many states as you possibly can. Now, when I say the theme doesn't come through, it really doesn't. You have different score pads for this, or ways of tracking. I guess player boards would be the better word for it, that have different genres. So you have rock and pop and country, which will have slightly different art in different parts of the country. But beyond that, there's not too much you can tell off of the theme. I certainly don't feel like a tour manager trying to plan out a route. I feel like someone trying to connect states from lowest to highest as best as I possibly can. Now, that being said, it's not a bad thing. It's actually a really, really solid one of these roll and write games. It's crunchy. It scales well. You can play this with, in theory, as many as 12 or 16 people, and it's going to be pretty much the same game. It's another one of these optimization games of who can use these resources best, knowing that the next die roll may completely throw your plans out of whack. Really enjoyed this one, and would recommend people take a look at it. That's On Tour from BoardGameTables.com.
So I backed that on Kickstarter, and I was like, I don't remember seeing any shipping notification for mine. Yeah, I totally forgot to fill out the Pledge Manager back in September.
Oh, I can tell you, as a Kickstarter person, and Dan, you can vouch for this, people who don't fill out their Pledge Managers are the worst.
Oh, we're terrible because we gave you money? Great, thanks.
But then you don't fill out the Pledge Manager, and then you'll get someone, say, a couple of years later, will be like, hey, where's my game? And I'll be like, well, you never provided us your address.
Right.
Come on, Sean.
Is this the kind of customer service experience you can expect from Gray Fox? Oh, I mean Monochromatic Wolf.
Monochromatic Wolf definitely has a customer service experience much like this, no doubt. In any case, so that's On Tour from BoardGameTables.com, which Sean will maybe be receiving sometime in the near future.
Bummer. All right. Well, I'm going to talk about Tokyo Highway, which is an interesting dexterity game from, I believe it's Itten, I-T-T-E-N Games. Have either of you guys played this dexterity game, Tokyo Highway?
I have not.
Oh, my goodness. Alex?
It's on my want-to-play list. I almost picked up a German edition at Essen, and I backed off on it, and I was somewhat regretting it.
It is super good. So apparently there used to be like a 2-player version, and this is the 4-player version. And basically you have a bunch of these like long, thin popsicle sticks, kind of. You also have these cylinders, and then you have different colored cars that are your player color cars. And the object here is to place out all of your cars out in the play area first. And you do that when you build a stretch of highway that is the first to go over or under another player's stretch of highway. So let me explain how that works, because it's might be hard to visualize. But basically, everyone starts the game with a single cylinder on the board, and the cylinder is maybe, half an inch high, and then one of their popsicle sticks with one end on the cylinder, the other end on the table. And then your first car is on it. And that's kind of your on-ramp to this highway that you're building. So then when it's your turn, you're going to place another set of cylinders, either one level higher or one level lower than the cylinder that you're connecting from. So in the first play of the game, you have to do a two high cylinder set, and then you will place your next popsicle stick on top of that. And so everyone's doing this together, and you're trying to basically create this little like network or spider web of intersecting, overlapping, underlapping highways. And the faster you can get to cover over people's or under people's. It's really interesting. It was really cool, and it looked really cool, and it was tense, and it was really nerve-wracking because when you're doing your placement, if you knock over other people's stuff, you have to give them a component for things that you're knocking over. So that's kind of a way to trigger the end game is by you're giving up stuff and you no longer have things to place on your turn. It looked really cool. Like the table presence was really sweet. The tension was really cool. The only downside, I think, is there comes a certain point in the game, late in the game, where it's with a bunch of people with fat fingers, and there were 3 of us with fat fingers playing, and you would knock over enough stuff that you couldn't quite remember what the board state was, and so you couldn't quite put it back correctly, and we just kind of called the game. And I'm wondering how often that happens, or if you just need to play with more dexterous people or not. And so for that reason, it on the spectrum of game versus activity, it might fall somewhere closer to activity. I don't care about that distinction personally. It was a lot of fun and I really enjoyed it. And like I said, it looks super cool on the table. I thought it was really fantastic. It kind of reminded me of the Climbers from Capstone. What's their
Simply Fun, or simply complex.
Simply complex.
I mean, Simply Fun would be a good one too.
You're thinking of Quick Simple Fun.
Oh yeah,
which is another. Well, and the Climbers isn't a dexterity game, but the thinkiness that you have in the Climbers, because you have those beautiful blocks on the table and that great table presence. This was similar, where it's pretty thinky. Like you're trying to plan out your routes and how to overlap. Is underlap a word? I think it's a word. Why not? It's a word now. Underlap. Tell your friends.
Shiplap is.
What is?
Shiplap.
Shiplap? Yeah, and this is a family podcast, so...
No, shiplap. It's a wood. It's a wood.
Oh, come on, Dan.
Yes.
Oh. Okay, well, so you can either overlap or shiplap, because these are all wooden pieces. I don't know.
Exactly.
What the heck is going on? It's definitely worth checking out.
I had a lot of fun with it, and I'm happy to play it again. So that is Tokyo Highway from Itten Games.
I've been playing something that I think Sean is going to be very interested in, and maybe I might be able to pique Alex's interest. Let's see. This is the upcoming next Vital Lacerda game from Eagle Griffin Games called Escape Plan.
Yes.
And for those of you that don't know, Vital Lacerda does super heavy games like Kanban and Lisboa and Venus and The Gallerist. Alex, have you played any of those? I think you have, haven't you?
Oh yeah, I've played some Lacerda. I've played actually the ones you mentioned, Venus, The Gallerist, absolutely.
Yeah, so in this game, you all have done a bank heist, and you have stuffed money in different businesses around the city, and the cops are chasing you, and so you're going to the businesses, taking the money that you've stashed, and you're trying to escape. In this game, you are if at the end you don't escape, you can't even possibly win. Think of Clank, where that deck building game where at the end you push your luck a little bit to try to get a little bit more, but if you don't get above the ground and you don't get out, you can't win. Same thing here, but this is more like a 2-hour game. Maybe closer to 90 minutes. It's one of his shorter games.
Interesting.
Even with 5, we finished in 90 minutes. So in this game, it actually for a Lacerda game, it's pretty simple. I mean, on your turn, you're most of the time just moving to different hexes, these huge hexes that make up a city. You're moving to different parts of the city. You're going to different businesses. Now, everybody has their own secret goals, and the different businesses will get you either money at the end of the game or money now. And you need money now to do different things to avoid the cops and do different, try to unlock lockers and do different things to get more money. So it's this like pay me now, pay me later thing. So you're going to these different businesses trying to figure out, which one should you try to go to. But every time you run around, there's these cops that you have to avoid because if not, you get wounds. And, there's obviously a lot of stuff going on. But simply, you're just moving, going to locations, and either stashing, getting money for the end or getting money now. That's pretty much the whole game. So mechanically it's simple, but there is a lot going on still because it's a Lacerda game, right? So lots of stuff to manage on your board, different abilities you can unlock, different things you get. You get some like contacts that basically are people that give you special abilities, but you can only put so many until you unlock so many other things. There's a lot of interwoven pieces here, as you would imagine with a Lacerda game. But from the core of it, it's simple. Move, do something, next person's turn. But by default, you only get 9 turns in the entire game, unless you spend some money to get some extra actions. So again, it's pretty punishing. It's the other cool thing is you're creating the map as the game goes on. So every time you play the game, it's going to be different because the different tiles come out at different times. People spin them and change how the map looks. So every time you play, it's going to be different. And it's definitely unique. So it's one of those things where I think people that love his heavy games are going to be like, hey, let's play a light game tonight. Let's play Escape Plan, right? But then people like maybe Alex and I will be like, we want to play a super heavy game tonight. We're in the mood for that. We'll play Escape Plan. So I think it's going to be an interesting thing where like it might be in that middle area that will possibly, be interesting to both sides of that coin for different reasons.
Sure.
Definitely worth checking out. The production in this thing is amazing. The bits are awesome. I think I had the deluxe version that had like these awesome, huge like metal keys that you use to unlock lockers at the convenience store to try to get a bunch of cash. It's pretty cool. Anyway, I enjoyed it. It's definitely different from everything else he's done. That's for sure.
Nice.
Oh, and he's going to be at the Arizona Game Fair, by the way.
That's right. He is. In fact, that was one of the deciding factors in my going.
Well, cool. I'm sure Escape Plan will be there, actually.
Yeah. I'm excited to meet Vital. It's going to be sweet.
Cool. Well, that's Escape Plan from Eagle Griffin.
Very nice. Next game I'm going to talk about is firmly in the Alex and Dan category. This is maybe a game that Sean would play with Chewy in a few years, but not typically by himself. So this is a game called Big Monster. It's the first game from a French publisher called Explore 8. It was brought over by a friend of mine who had heard about it, and it's really interesting. It's a combination of drafting, tile placement with some amount of a real-time element to it. So how this is going to work, this game plays up to 6 players, and the play I got of this was with 6 players. You can either play in teams or play solo. I think it's primarily meant as more of a team game. And what you're going to do is you're going to have a stack of tiles to draft from. You're going to draft these kind of 2-sided domino tiles, and then pick one. And here's the trick is, you don't just pass the stack to your left, as you might do in a typical drafting game. You're going to pass it to one of your other opponents, or if you're playing with teams, your teammate. And if you are the last person to pass your set of tiles and there's a space open in front of you, in other words, you haven't received tiles and you haven't passed your own tiles, you're going to take a penalty for that. So that's where the real-time element comes in. The game encourages you to make your decisions quickly or else possibly be left out in the cold. You're trying to build these different monsters. There's lava monsters that you can form in different patterns to make gems, which will score you endgame points. There's monsters that by themselves are kind of wimpy, but if you place other tiles that are mutation rays, they get progressively beefier. Players have individual player powers that will determine what kind of things you might be going for. And I got to say, it all came together really well. It's light on the lighter end of things, but it does a good job of blending those mechanics into an accessible package. And looks bright on the table and was actually pretty fun to play. So if you get a chance, keep an eye out for Big Monster. I don't think it's very easy to get your hands on, but actually a good amount of fun.
All right, well, that's going to do it for all of our recent plays. Let's head on over to the news desk.
So up in news, turns out WizKids... Oh, wait, nope, just kidding. The only news I care about this week is my good buddy Dan King, the Game Boy Geek. Dan, you are running a Kickstarter currently for, what is this, season 7, season 8, season 9, season 20 of the Game Boy Geek?
What a good segue, Alex.
Wait a sec.
I'm so proud of you.
Is that why you're here on the podcast? To promote your Kickstarter? I cannot believe this.
This is the one time a year I get invited on to hang out with you guys.
We invited you as the constant third chair, and you don't return the emails. So,
right.
Jeez.
Dan, tell us what this Kickstarter is all about.
Oh, it's season 7. So for the last 6 years, I've produced over 1,800 videos about board games, with 80% of those being reviews. So I help you find the next board game you'll love. And so do normal reviews, and then I do these Allegro reviews that allow you to see in just 2 minutes. I give you a 1-minute overview, 1-minute review to see if you want to spend more time to watch the full review, to see if it might be a game you want to watch and play, maybe buy, maybe avoid, save some money. I also have done rule schools, over 150 of those, and that is basically I teach you how to set up and play the game so that you don't have to read the rule book. I'm sure Alex loves those. Right, Alex?
I do.
So we teach you how to play those. I've also started a series called Gaming on Purpose, which is where we come alongside cool charities in the local area and shine the light on them, showing them what they do, get people inspired to help them out, and then we come alongside them and help them obtain their mission by using board games. And that's been a fun little thing, and that's kind of how the new tagline for my channel has now become reducing barriers and growing relationships through board games, because I've seen how much this has really been a big part of why I've done what I've done for the last 6 years. So now we're looking at season 7. And all my channel, like most content creators, are free, and we want to keep it that way. So we want to give people an opportunity. If they like the channel and they like the content, they can decide to possibly pledge and get all sorts of cool rewards too, even some from Monochromatic Wolf. Hey, wait, I don't have to say that. I'm not with them. I can say it anyways. You can even get it from Gray Fox Games.
Oh, boy.
Because that's not against the rules.
I'm just going to bleep it out. It's fine.
It's okay, Dan. You tried. You do owe me that $20 back, though, if he bleeps it out. So, Dan, what makes this year special? What are you hoping to do in this next year that you're hoping this thing can help spur for you?
I was hoping that we might raise enough funds to do this full time, which is about 2x the funding goal. Is because Kickstarter is all or nothing, right? So you got to put a goal that you are somewhat hopeful that you can meet, but then, of course, you have other goals, right? And I'd love to do this full time. I put 30 hours a week in my channel on top of a 40-hour week full time job as an engineer, and I'd love to do this full time. So that's the real thing I'm trying to do here.
Gotcha. And what would that mean to you to be able to go full time?
Oh my gosh, pinch me. I mean, waking up every day and being able to create content and teach rules, and oh man, that's a dream come true, man.
Dan, what sets your channel apart? You mentioned it being kind of a way to build bridges. Is that where you kind of consider? I know high energy is obviously a big hallmark of your videos and what you like to do.
Yeah, I mean the high energy, the very the way that I can explain games in a quick fashion. So I would even call it short form, but yet you still have a really good idea of how the game works when you're done with my overview, and I haven't put you to sleep, and it's not 40 minutes long, I think being able to dissect the game really in a way that's easily obtainable and not in not a long period of time. And then also, yes, using the games in real life and out into the community and making a difference with them.
Not related to your Kickstarter, but just something I'm always curious about. Dan, if you could be any flavor of ice cream, what flavor of ice cream would you be and why?
Really, Alex?
Yeah.
Well, I would have to say mocha.
Why?
Because I'm smooth, baby.
Someone has to make that a ringtone. Because I'm smooth.
Hey, it's with a V-E-E. Because I'm smooth, baby.
See, I thought it was going to be referring to the caffeine buzz you get from mocha, and since you do high energy reviews, I would think.
That's the thing is I don't even do caffeine. You don't want to see me on coffee, dude.
Well, and also the fact that you put out as many videos as you do while still having a full-time job as an engineer would imply mocha would imply that kind of buzz. You're kind of self-buzz guy, yes. So I get that
buzz for sure.
Now, normally that ice cream question is my last one, but I did have one other one. Uh-oh. Dan.
Why weren't these in the show notes, man? He's ambushing me, Sean. Why are you letting this happen, man?
That's his old reporter ways coming back to haunt him.
Just one more question. Just one more question, Dan. What is the worst board game you played in the last year?
Ooh, in the last year.
You've been so focused on negative things lately, Alex. Like, off air, I'm giving you a little time to think about it, Dan, and maybe even, bow out. But, lately, Alex's idea is how about we do top 6, games that we hate and top 6 biggest disappointments. Just negative Nelly.
Okay, let me also help Dan buy some time with an explanation. I think there are a lot of reviewers out there, I'm not going to name anyone specifically, and Dan certainly does not fit the bill for this, who are only positive about games. That is the only trait of their reviews is they love this game and they love that. I think you need a contrast. How do you know how great something is unless you have something terrible to compare it to? So, I don't know. Maybe I'm just being mean to Duke Alex again. Maybe that's creeping back in.
Really? You're being that guy. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah. Dan, have you come up with your pick?
I need to go look in my garage with the 150 that are on the shelf that I played and didn't review yet.
Uh-oh.
Well, but that's something, right, Dan? Like, you have a limited amount of time, and if you're going to review a game, you're going to get multiple plays of it in. And sometimes, especially with the amount of reviews that you do, Alex and I do a review once every other week. Well, I do one once every other week. Alex does it slightly less frequently. But with the rate at which you're reviewing games, I mean, you've got to invest the time in things that you're going to enjoy. Like, if you're playing nothing but bad games, you're going to be miserable.
Yeah, it is one of those things where, like, I would much rather spend time on something I'm excited about than something I'm not. And you're not even just talking about the playing of it, but you're talking about the production of it, right?
Absolutely.
Like of all the content. So that's why most of my reviews tend to be, at worst case. Well, I've done a lot of negative reviews, but
sure.
I've shied away from those just because, again, they're not inspiring to me. Like, it takes so much time to do that I'd rather be doing something that. And if I didn't really like it, if it's something that's really popular, really hot, I still will go do it because people want to, a big audience would like to know that, right?
Yeah. And
I always try to do a good job of doing pros and cons, regardless of how much I like or, am, indifferent about a game, right? But if you give me 2 minutes, let me go in my garage and I'll tell you.
Well, and that's fair enough. And certainly the sheer number of copies. I mean, how many games do you think you played last year, unique games?
Probably between 2 and 250.
Okay. Yeah. That's averaging a new game every 2 new games every 3 days, basically.
Yeah, because I know that typically I do 3 reviews a week, and so that's about 150 reviews I did. And I know that probably maybe even almost half of them I probably didn't even review that I played. So maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's closer to 300.
Wow. Well, very cool. Sean, anything else for Dan?
Well, I have a question for you, Alex. How many non-baseball highlights 2045? First mention, I beat you both.
Oh my gosh, how did that just happen?
Yes.
Why did we let this happen?
We were asleep at the wheel.
How many non-baseball highlight games have you played last year, Alex?
Oh, a lot. A ton.
I'm just joking.
Sean, how many conventions did you go to last year?
None, because I'm not in the industry.
I know. It's very sad.
Why would you rub it in? I will say, last night at Duke's Dice Wednesday night over at Empire Board Game Library, we finished up our final game of Architects of the West Kingdom, and my buddy Curtis looked over and was like, okay, well, is there anything you need to get done for the podcast? And I was like, no, there is nothing I need to play. So he's like, then you figure out what you want to play, and let's play. You know what we play, Dan?
What?
Lords of Vegas, baby.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, 4-player Lords of Vegas. I pulled it out in the end. Such a good time. I love that game so much.
I would have pulled out baseball highlights.
I know.
Yeah, you know what, Alex? There's 2 bundles that do have baseball highlights and football highlights, so you could talk about those. And actually, those are still available.
Well, and speaking of baseball highlights, one of the rewards that folks can get is not just baseball highlights, right, but also the future football highlights.
Yeah, both games, and both of those come with my promo card, the King Yaz baseball card and the King Flutie football card.
Can I tell you, I am upset. No, not really upset, but very jealous that you have promo cards for my favorite game of all time, and I have never made it. I guess I'm not a big enough of a deal, content creator wise, to merit such consideration.
Alex, have you asked them?
I kind of have hinted around it, but not directly.
No. None of this hinted around stuff. Have you asked them and said, I would really love to be in the game?
I think I've told Mike that.
Well, Mike's not the publisher. You're asking the wrong person.
I know Mike's not the publisher. I haven't done that. I'd be so awkward to ask that. I don't know.
I don't want to hear you complain until you ask it, Alex.
Man.
I'm putting you in your place right now.
Alex has begged Mike. I was there. You were like asking Mike, come on, Mike, can you play in the game? Yeah, seriously.
I have done that. That is fair.
Yeah. Well, you were tiptoeing. You're like, oh, maybe, kind of. No, come on. You were doing it.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to apologize for dreaming.
Or if you don't care about football, Alex, you can get the baseball highlights with the Grand Slam pack, which is all 10 expansions as a reward, too.
Oh, there you go. Now, when he puts out Hockey Highlights 2067, that's when I'm going to really want to be in that game. Anyway.
But speaking of Mike Fitzgerald, and I don't think you mentioned this yet, you've got a pledge level that gives you consultations with some famous designers like Mike Fitzgerald, Antoine Bauza, Jeff Engelstein, Bruno Catala, Emerson Matsuuchi. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I mean, if you're an aspiring designer and you get some design challenges, I couldn't think of a better way to do that.
Well, awesome. Dan, anything else you wanted to say on the Kickstarter before we moved on?
No, there's probably about 15 days left by the time this goes live, so half the campaign left. If you like my content, then I'd appreciate any pledges you can make.
Awesome.
Well, Dan, people can obviously go check it out on Kickstarter. You produce some awesome, amazing stuff. If we didn't believe that, then we wouldn't have you on the show. So we absolutely believe that and support you and think you're awesome.
You guys are awesome.
I'll agree with that.
Well, that's going to do it for our news. Let's head on over to our review.
Well, hold on there. Before we head on over to the review, we should point out that Dan's going to duck out of the review. Not because he hasn't adequately prepared. Someone can't prepare if they're not informed. Hey, by the way, this is the game we're going to review. Can you do that? Someone dropped the ball there. I'm not going to name names.
No, and let me name names because I know that 85% of the guild is going to assume that person who dropped the ball is me, and it was not. It was Sean.
All right. I take full responsibility. So we will have a Danless review coming up.
So Sean, I like recording the podcast with you, but man, it doesn't feel right if I'm not doing it at a proper table. Right now I'm sitting at this dinky square kitchen table. It's kind of cramped. I don't feel like if I needed to roll dice, they just kind of clank around and it just wouldn't be a satisfying experience. So I feel like I could use an upgrade.
Oh, well, perhaps a game topper from our good buddy Berkey would be the right solution to your particular problem, Alex.
Is that right? Well, good thing I actually already have one of those fine things.
Oh, perfect.
And really enjoy using it.
So is this a solution to a problem that you no longer have?
When I move in with my girlfriend Abby, it will be a problem I will no longer have because I'll bring this game topper over here and then I'll have that ready to go either when I'm podcasting or chucking some dice or playing games or whatever else. It can convert the benign kitchen table into a fun gaming experience at a nice, affordable price. And if you order now, every single game topper comes with 5 pounds of Berkey jerky.
Ooh, does it really?
No, I actually don't think that's a deal.
Yeah, we probably shouldn't say that.
Would make me more likely to buy a second one, because that jerky, I can't get enough of that jerky in my life.
Mwah! Is all I have to say about Berkey's jerky.
Also, mwah! That's what I have to say about his game toppers. Berkey, you are a mwah kind of guy.
Be sure to check out Game Toppers over at GameToppersLLC.com. So, Alex, do you recall playing the multiplayer worker placement game Yokohama by our fine sponsors over at Tasty Minstrel Games?
Boy, it was so long ago, and yeah, of course I remember. It was an awesome game, Sean. An amazing game.
Yeah, we both enjoyed it quite a bit. So I was excited to hear that Yokohama Duel, which is all the rage nowadays, take an awesome game and then put Duel on it, and now you've got a sweet 2-player game. And I think that's what's going to happen here, don't you?
Oh yeah, no, this looks great.
So this will be coming to Kickstarter in late January of this year, so keep your eyes out for that. Yokohama Duel is a 2-player worker placement game that lasts 4 rounds, with each player taking 4 turns each round. The game includes 10 different areas, and each area can be used only once each round. Workers have certain powers, but they can only be used by people with low power. To gain victory points, players must complete the order form, build shops and trading houses, clear custom goods, and dedicate the church. At the end of the game, whichever player has more points is the winner.
So if you fancy yourself a merchant, you might want to go prepare some funds to invest in a copy of Yokohama Duel, coming soon from Tasty Minstrel Games. Sean, I have so thoroughly mastered the game of Onitama, I can beat all challengers. I cannot be stopped, even by you, even by death itself. But is there anything left for me to do in this game? I feel like I'm so good at it. I just need something more.
Well, Alex, I don't know, because you haven't yet seen my wind spirit.
Your wind spirit?
Yes, my wind spirit. I have a devastating wind spirit, Alex, that all should avoid.
Because the wind spirit gonna mess you up.
All of the New Mexican food, Alex, gives me a ferocious wind spirit.
Well, I don't think that kind of wind spirit is maybe as useful as you're thinking. The wind spirit that comes, though, in the new expansion for Onitama, Way of the Wind, can add some pretty interesting possibilities. It's an impassable piece on the board that can move using certain of the technique cards. Some of those cards will make it very, very, very tricky. You can't move into it, you can't move onto it, but it can move into you, and if it does, it switches places with your piece, and if it does that, it might put you in a pretty vulnerable position. So beware of the wind spirit in Onitama Way of the Wind, now available from fine retailers, from our partners at Arcane Wonders. This week, we're taking a trip to a land of marble, gravel, bricks, gold, and citizens' arrests. We're talking Architects of the West Kingdom.
All right, Architects of the West Kingdom is yet another title in the directional series from Renegade Games and Shem Phillips, following hot off the heels of Raiders of the North Sea. So this is a worker placement game that lasts a variable number of rounds, and the object is to have the most victory points at the end. Big shocker there. And you're going to do this by doing a couple different things. You can build buildings from the hand of cards that you're drawing, or you could build levels in the cathedral, which is kind of a semi-cooperative thing that you're all doing. Now, as I said, it's a worker placement game, and so you're using workers to get various resources like wood, stone, gold, brick, marble, etc. But there's a catch here, Alex, and I think this is what makes this game most interesting. Most of the spaces on the board are not exclusive, as you would find in most worker placement games. So in other words, you can have multiple of your worker there, you can have multiple of other players' workers in a certain spot. And the other thing is, Alex, you are starting with, I believe it's 25 workers?
Is it 25 or is it 20?
Or 20. Maybe it's 20.
I think it's just 20.
Yeah, okay, 20. Either way, that's a lot of workers, Alex.
Yeah,
you don't have any way to gain more. That's what you got. But here's why. Because when you go to a spot, typically you'll take an action. Like if I go to the forest, I'll go there with one worker and I'll get one wood. All right, simple enough. On a next turn or subsequent turn, if I go there with yet another worker, I'm now going to get 2 wood for that one action. My next turn, I go there with a third worker. I'm getting 3 wood. So by investing in certain spaces, you're going to increase the output of what you get from them. Or in other spaces, you might multiply the number of actions you can take. So that's pretty interesting. Now, there's a catch, though, because you might think, oh, well, that just sounds simple. Load up on a couple things, specialize in wood or stone or whatever, and do your thing. There's a policing action. So you can go to the town center, and when you go to the town center, you're able to round up from any space on the board all of the workers of one particular color. And you basically take them hostage, which you can then later sell them basically to the guardhouse. You get $1 for each one that you send back, which can help you out money-wise, but can also deprive your opponents of having workers to be able to place, because then they'll also have to take an action to go to the guardhouse to then rescue or bring back those workers. So there's a very interesting dynamic of you want to maximize these spaces, but you don't want to become targets for people using the town center. In addition, if I want to go to the town center with a second worker, I can now take 2 colors of workers from a single spot. And I'm kind of referring to the 4-player game. There's some slight different rules for a 2- and 3-player game, but it's pretty interesting. And so you're kind of counting on people at the table to self-police to make sure that someone isn't getting a bunch of crazy resources or crazy actions. And it's an interesting dynamic of I need to be playing my game, but I also need to be watching what other people are doing. There are some action spots where you can go and get apprentices. Apprentices are cards that will give you some sort of special ability. For instance, whenever you go to get wood, it might give you an extra wood. It might give you an ability where whenever you pay off a debt, you get some sort of bonus, like 2 brick or 2 stone. So lots of different ways to kind of customize your play based on which apprentices you get. You can also go to an action space to get more building cards. And these building cards typically have some sort of end game scoring, and they require you to have certain types of apprentices in play. There are like artisans and craftsmen, and I think like stone workers. So you need certain prerequisites of those apprentices to be able to build these buildings, which is a big way that you're going to potentially score some points. There's also the black market. And what's interesting about the black market is those are the only exclusive spots on the board. And they give you some pretty nice abilities, some pretty strong abilities. They usually cost you money, and they also cost you valor. I think it's probably a good time to talk about valor. Valor is this track on one side of the board. And at the end of the game, if you're high up on the valor track, you're going to get some end game bonus points. If you're low on the valor track at the end of the game, you're going to lose some points. But mid-game, it affects what you're able to do. So, for example, if I'm at a certain high point on the valor track, I am too valorous, I'm too noble, I can't use the black market. Similarly, if I'm at a certain low point on the valor track, I'm too much of a scoundrel to be able to build, to contribute to the cathedral of the town. And there's lots of other little factors there. And so it's an interesting game that you're playing within the game to not only determine where you are at the end of the game, but what benefits or negative effects you might have based on where you are on the valor track. So that's pretty interesting. There's also the King's Storehouse, which is a spot where you can go to turn in resources to get valor, but also to get marble. It's really the only main way to get marble in the game. And then finally, as far as the major spaces, there's also the Guild Hall. When you go to the Guild Hall, it allows you to build a card from your hand-paying resources as indicated on the card, or build a level of the cathedral. And as you build a level of the cathedral, you're going to score some pretty impressive points based on where you end up at the end of the game. And there's an interesting availability of early cathedral steps, and then it becomes more restrictive as things go up. And so basically, only one player can ever build the tippy top of the cathedral, which is worth 20 points at the end of the game. And then generally, you also get some sort of random bonus from building a level of the cathedral that usually includes some amount of valor, which is pretty interesting. The other interesting thing about the Guild Hall, is that it's also sort of the timer for the game. Once you have a certain number of people that have filled up the Guild Hall, that's going to trigger the end game. Everyone gets a final round. And whoever has the most points from buildings, cathedral, negative points from having people left over in the guardhouse, etc., is the winner of Architects of the West Kingdom. I left out a couple things, but I think that's a good place to kind of start in order for us to jump into the review. So, Alex, what are your first impressions, general thoughts of Architects of the West Kingdom?
So when you see a mechanic like worker placement as the core mechanic of a game, in order for it to really stand out, it has to do something really unique and really interesting to have it pop. And I think Architects of the West Kingdom does that. It takes this mechanic that so many of us are so familiar with and adds a couple of really interesting twists to it that have that mechanic actually feel fresh again and engaging again. And it all adds up to a pretty awesome experience, an experience that is surprisingly thematic, well-produced, and in a game that is really enjoyable, doesn't overstay its welcome, and has a lot of thematic flair to it that I appreciate. I really enjoyed my play of Architects of the West Kingdom, and I'm curious where you're going to fall on this. I don't know if it's too light for you, Sean.
I don't think it's too light. I think, if anything, it's probably a little bit heavier than Raiders of the North Sea, like if you're comparing just base game to base game. So the problem is not that it's too light. The problem is just that it is another midweight Euro. Right? Which we've kind of talked about. There has to be something really, really special about a midweight Euro for me to really latch onto and really like it. And I will say that this worker placement twist is really good. I really like it. This is much more interactive than most worker placement games by like an exponential factor. Because really, with few exceptions, the big way to interact in most worker placement games is just by cutting someone off of a spot, right? And there are exceptions, but for the most part, that's pretty much the case. I think of like, in my mind, like the quintessential worker placement game is Lords of Waterdeep. And maybe that's because that was the first worker placement game I ever played. But there's a certain, not simplicity, but it's simple. Simplicity is bad, but it's simple. But there's also a good amount of interaction with the intrigue cards. Here, there is so much interaction because that town center spot, that policing spot, is super important because it can generate a lot of income for you, but it also keeps people from becoming too powerful in certain actions, and maybe you can really screw up some plays. Like, for example, when you go to the recruiting spot where you can get apprentices, the way it works is there are 4 columns of apprentices. And when you place one worker there, you pay $4 and you have your choice of either apprentice in that first column. But with the second worker you place there, now you open up the two apprentice columns, and third one, fourth one, etc. And so maybe you're like, man, I really want this fourth guy over here. I've got 3 guys there. I'll place the fourth one there, and I'll get this guy I really need that's really going to synergize with the strategy I've got going. Can't wait for my turn to come around because I'm going to do it. And then someone grabs your guys that are there, and you're like, oh, man. But it's not super punishing, right? Like, if it were more punishing, it would be really painful. It's not. It's certainly annoying. And you're like, okay, I got to go get those guys back. And there are kind of ways to mitigate that in certain situations, right? Like with the apprentices, I can go there and then I can pay extra money to maybe get the guy that I want. So it's certainly annoying and it's frustrating, but it's not. It doesn't feel so debilitating or bad. It's just a little annoying, right?
Yeah, you're right. And you can certainly plan multiple turns ahead and have that all thrown to the side. And then find your way digging yourself back up, and maybe you get desperate enough to go to the black market to try and get your plans back on track, or maybe you have to go get more building cards, or maybe now is the time you're going to start contributing to the church. There's enough responses in this game where if someone messes with your plan, it can be rough, but it's not game ending by any means. It's also interesting to me, Sean, we mentioned how many workers there are in this game. You have 20 workers, and in some cases, it doesn't feel like you have enough.
Yeah.
You can get stretched pretty thin because those workers stay out on the board and the turns tend to last longer than you would anticipate. So, yeah, let's get into this, though. Rulebook. Sean, how did you find this game as far as learning it?
So I had our buddy Eugene teach me initially, and then I wound up teaching the game myself 2 more times. It having learned it from someone was helpful. I didn't think the rulebook itself was particularly strong. It just seemed like a dump of text on the pages, kind of. Like it lacked a certain amount of organization and breakout boxes and not to say that it was bad, and not to say that I couldn't have learned it from the rulebook, but it wasn't a super strong rulebook, I didn't think.
Yeah, here's my main issue with the rulebook. They break up some of these roles, some of the explanations of characters and some of the explanations of buildings into separate rulebooks, right? They put them in a whole separate rulebook for whatever reason. And I found some of that stuff hard to find at times.
So what they did in the appendix was, rather than just list the name of the building card or the apprentice, they listed all of similar types together, so that I couldn't just find alphabetically the lumberjack or whatever. I forget what they're called. I would have to kind of look for the group that had a similar ability, and so that was a little hard to find. Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, it's that, and it's also the fact that it's in a whole different section of things, and this isn't necessarily a base game issue, but I was playing on a copy where you had some promos mixed in, and those were sometimes hard to find. I didn't find things as quickly as I wanted to in this rulebook. in terms of learning it, I learned it just fine. Actually, primarily from a watch it played video, not from the rulebook itself. But the rulebook does a good enough job reinforcing how certain actions work and what's necessary. But where I found it lacking was in looking up different abilities. Iconography, Sean, did you dig the iconography on this one?
Yeah, I think it was pretty straightforward. The only thing that was kind of confusing is there are certain abilities that have an X over them, which I think you would normally think means like pay this, but usually it means you don't have this requirement. And but once I figured out that's what that means, it was pretty straightforward. So yeah, I think overall the iconography was pretty good. I'm trying to think if there were any significant problems. So like, for example, on the cards, whether they're the builders or the buildings or the apprentices, you would have like a little tab area that had a lightning bolt, means when you buy this or build this, here's the immediate effect. And then it might have a symbol that says that's a flag, meaning end game, you're going to check for this. Or sometimes there's also a little money bag symbol, which is the market or the black market reset, which we didn't really talk about rules-wise, but it's a way to kind of reset the black market. And then it's kind of like a mini scoring thing that could happen on the negative with things happening in the guardhouse. So I think once you kind of realized how it set all that up, the only weird thing was there were some cards that would give you two different immediate bonuses. And so you were used to seeing the immediate bonus in one particular section, and the other section was meant for like an ongoing or end of game thing. And to kind of see another lightning bolt there was a little weird at first, but not a huge deal.
Yeah. Well, and what I struggled briefly with some iconography, but for the most part got the game. I will say that in playing this, I found that there were more struggles with the iconography, or people had more issues with parsing that out than I've seen or would have expected from it. So for some reason, I got it, but I could also think of several situations where people wouldn't necessarily get it for whatever reason. It clicked for me, but I also saw where it didn't click for others.
I will say this. There is a spot on the cathedral. So whenever you're building a level of the cathedral, you're paying some amount of marble or gold or wood and stone. So like the second and fourth level, it's some combination of 4 stone and wood, and then the fourth level, some combination of 8 stone and wood. Where it says stone/wood, this tripped up Nick, because it was, from his vantage point, it was hard to see the slash. So he thought he had to pay 4 sets of wood and stone for that first or that second level or first level, whatever it is.
Second level of the cathedral. I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Okay. And the funny thing is that slash is almost parallel with underlying artwork of the game. Yeah. It is also light colored. So it was very easy to miss. Whereas the spot below it, the King's Storehouse, the slash is over a very dark piece of art. And so it's very clear, very distinct. So that was a little off-putting.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, and I ran into that issue, especially with someone who was sitting further away from that spot on the table. They had a very hard time reading, what am I supposed to do next? What's this? I will say as a whole, though, I found the game reasonably easy to learn, and for the most part, the game did a good job of that. But yeah, as we mentioned, there were some hurdles.
Yeah.
So let's talk art and graphics. We kind of talked a little bit about graphics, but what about the overall look, the feel of the game, the production of the game? How did you think this one came off?
So this is same with Raiders of the North Sea. This is art by Mahalo Dmitrievsky, and he has a pretty distinct style. I mean, you can very easily recognize it's the same artist between both games, and I think it works. I think it's kind of a very stylized art. It's not realistic looking. I mean, it's not I don't mean that in a bad way, but it's a very stylized art, and I think nice bold colors. I think it looks good on the table, and I think the cards look solid. I think the art is good, and it's certainly bold. I think it's a very bold looking art style.
It's bold and clear. It's one that you can recognize as, that's a Garfield Games, that's Shem Phillips, that's part of this series. It's kind of become a nice visual language that's consistent game to game. And I think really helps put you in this universe and puts you in the feel and sets it apart visually. And I think it's a really nice look to it. I like the look in Raiders. I like the look in this one too.
Yeah.
As far as components go, now I may have this wrong. Sean, did you have a retail copy or did you have a Kickstarter e-copy of this?
This was a retail copy, although it had Kickstarter coins. I
was wondering about the coins because the coins in this are incredible. But those are Kickstarter ones, so I'll avoid talking about those too much. The shapes, I think are the resource bits also Kickstarter only, or are those how they? I don't know how they come in retail. Whatever it was, the version I played with, which may be a Kickstarter version, so take some of this with a grain of salt. The components are really nice. The bricks stand out well. The nuggets work well. The little sticks are nice branches. It's high quality bits that you're using as part of this game. Card quality is nice. Card layout is nice. Everything about this game is communicated well. And it felt like, as a whole, components, art, you throw it all together, it's a nice cohesive production. I really enjoyed the experience of this.
Yeah, I think the production's solid. It looks good on the table. It feels good. What I will say, and it's kind of weird, it's just such a small box. Like, you see the size of the box, and you're not expecting this full-blown medium weight Euro worker placement game. The way that everything gets crammed in this tiny box is kind of crazy. It just looks super tiny. Like,
but very efficient. It all fits in there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice. Gameplay. Let's talk gameplay. Sean, what was the most satisfying part of this gameplay for you?
Well, this was definitely more of a tactical gameplay than I expected. So generally in worker placement games, they tend to, in my opinion, lean more on the strategic side of things. You have a certain plan you're trying to enact, and yes, there are some tactical decisions to be made. Someone just took my spot. Okay, plan B or C, got to figure it out. Here, you have to kind of react to what other people are doing. Maybe I have a very distinct plan, but right before me, someone placed a fourth worker on a spot where there's another player's pieces of three workers. And man, I already have one person in the town center. I really wasn't planning on going to the town center, but I'm going to get 7 workers if I nab them all up. Okay, I better do that. It's a really interesting kind of ebb and flow of workers going in, workers coming out, of trying to keep workers hostage for as long as possible. Like, if I don't need the money to send them to the guardhouse, I'm going to try and hurt someone by keeping their workers. But what's nice is, again, there's a way around that where they can go to the guardhouse and then basically kind of like pay a ransom. They pay out the nose for it, but they can get their workers back. So I felt like it was managing a lot of different moving parts. It was almost like you're spinning plates, right? And you're trying to keep them all spinning at once, and you cannot get too much tunnel vision, because there can be some very lucrative opportunities that reveal themselves, and you really got to be watching for that.
That's true, and I found that to be especially true at the tax stand, where the money can just build up in the tax stand, and it's easy to get focused on doing fun things like, I had a ton of fun with that town center action, the citizens arrest space. You're under arrest, but you're way down on the virtue track. What are you doing arresting anyone? You don't pay taxes and you're out here arresting people? Yep, that's what I do. I'm a bounty hunter. Deal with it. Well, I'm going to go to the town center. I'm going to arrest you from the town center. Oh, okay. Well, it's interesting how you can get caught up in that, and we'll talk more about theme and some of the feel of that a little bit later on. But you're right about tunnel vision, and some actions may look really appealing. Oh, I'm going to get 4 stones out of this, or I'm going to get this really interesting assistant. And it can be easy to be distracted from, how do you win this game? What is the point of this game? And the point of this game is, hey, to get the most points from buildings and the most points from cathedral, like just the most points in general. And it can get so easy to get tied up in, I'm just going to get a whole bunch of resources. I'm going to do this because it's really satisfying, and lose track of, oh crap, I need to be building. And suddenly it's too late in the game, and you haven't built enough, and oops. So I think the game is interesting in that there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of spaces where there's red herrings, it feels like, where there's moments that you feel like, oh, this might be a really strong move, or this is a fun move to do, but it's not actually the thing that's going to help me win. And maybe to the surprise of no one, I found myself getting into those traps very, very, very frequently.
So I will point out, and it's interesting to me, that you gravitated towards the town center spot, because that's also where Matthew gravitated towards. I kept calling him the chief of police because he just he was just all over that spot. And it's interesting. Like to me, that's probably the most interesting part of the game. Like the rest of the game is standard, resource gathering, turn it into stuff. Pretty standard fare. But this was really interesting, right? Because, man, you're really incentivized to focus on certain spaces because you get really good output from it. But sometimes you're just kind of spreading yourself out there to give yourself options and to also not then become a target, right? And it's just a really interesting way the game kind of pulls you between these two different ways of playing. And what's going to work for you right now versus work for you later.
Well, and the actions can be so valuable from stacking up workers in a space.
Right.
It can also be really tempting to abuse that and make that space as juicy as possible and milk it while you still can before someone goes to the town center and shuts your whole game down. It also encourages you to try and play divergent strategies from someone else, because if you are... Maybe you don't have a ton of workers somewhere, but if someone else does and someone has built up enough people on the town center to come and rope you all at once, you might just get swept up in that crackdown. Yeah. So it may not even be about you, but you have to be careful about where you're placing and trying to avoid places where too many people have congregated, so to speak. I found that worked really well, and you're right, was one of the more satisfying and interesting parts of this experience as a whole. I do find that stacking up more workers to get more actions part of the game pretty interesting as well, but it only works in combination with the citizens' arrest space, the town center space.
Yeah, no, I think so. So what I found also interesting was the Valor track.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I feel like you can play one of three ways. You can either say, I'm gonna be super high on the Valor track because there's some good end game scoring points there, or I'm gonna stay near the bottom because it's going to make it cheaper for me to do certain actions. Basically, you talked about the tax stand. There are certain spots on the board that have costs in money. And some of that money goes to the bank and some goes to the tax stand. So there are spots lower on the Valor track that let you ignore certain amounts of tax payments. And that's pretty interesting. But when you're hovering down at the bottom, if you do something that loses Valor and you go off the track, now you gain a debt. So a debt is a card that if you have it unpaid at the end of the game, you lose 2 victory points. That's a problem. But if you go to the guardhouse and you basically pay $6 or maybe less, because some of that money is tax payments, you get to flip the card over, you've paid the debt, and you gained Valor. Basically, you're a good credit risk because you're showing I get debt, but I pay it off. And so there's some interesting stuff there. Plus, you can kind of synergize that with certain apprentices who pay you things whenever you pay back debt. So here's what I found. I found that it was kind of easy to play a high Valor game and spam the cathedral, especially if you have the synergy to get the resources that you need. Now, you don't want to, I don't think you want to focus so much on the cathedral that you don't build buildings. You definitely need to do that. I do think the other main way to play is where you are playing this low Valor game. And I found that incredibly challenging. And in fact, I found it much more rewarding. I didn't do nearly as well when I tried that strategy, but it was an interesting balance. I haven't talked about magic yet this episode, Alex.
Oh, nice. Okay, good.
The reference that I made was playing high Valor, building a bunch of cathedrals, felt like playing an aggro deck, whereas playing low Valor felt like playing a control deck in Magic.
Okay.
I know that means nothing to you.
It means nothing. And I will say this. I think is usually some sort of a middle ground you need to find. So the first game I played of this, I played aggressively high Valor. I dumped 5 of my workers into the cathedral as soon as I could. I was as good of a good boy as I could be, although I ended up in some issues during the King's Reset and had too many folks clogging up the jails and got some debts and wasn't as high up on the Valor track, but, it was doing pretty well. Did as best as I could to be high Valor and was getting mopped. The floor was mopped with me because although I reached the top of the cathedral track, that was the vast majority of my points. That was, I think, I had a score of 27 that game, and that was 20 of my points was on that kind of stuff. I didn't get high enough on the Valor track for it to work. The next game I played with the variable setup. And this is something we haven't mentioned. The characters have two sides. You can either play where everyone has basically the same starting setup at the start of the game, or you can play one where your characters have unique powers and abilities, and I found that the much more fun way to play. I was playing as Hugo, who starts with half of his workers in jail, starts with 10 workers in jail, and starts, I think, at 3 or 4 on the Valor track on the board.
Was that the green one?
Yeah, backside of the green one.
Yeah, I've done that one.
Yeah, but what's cool about him is you can pay two coins to avoid getting a debt in the first place, which is a really nice little ability that encourages you to continue being bad. That was a game, by the way, where I was the sheriff. I was the evil sheriff, just kind of roping people up with no moral authority to do so. And I did badly in that game too, I might add. I didn't quite find that right balance of building enough buildings and being successful enough resource-wise, because I had to focus towards the end of the game about digging myself out of the low end of the Valor track so I didn't get hit with too many negative points. There are definitely multiple ways to play, but I think the best way you can possibly play tends to be somewhere in that middle road, but it's not the easiest road to find all the time.
So what play counts did you get in?
Primarily only at 4 players and 5 players. I didn't play it at any of the lower player counts.
Okay. So I played at 4, 3, and 2, but with 2, we played with the bot. You never got a chance to play with the bot?
No, I never got a chance to play with the bot.
So you could play solo with a bot, or you could play 2 players with a bot. And it was pretty interesting. Basically, it's a deck of cards, and you flip it over. It tells you where it's sending its worker, and then it kind of gives you a hierarchy of things to do. I will say that I think I prefer it at 3. Not having played 5, I think it was a little too slow at 4. Not terribly so, but for me, 3 was really the sweet spot. What'd you think of it at 5?
It worked great. I got to tell you, it worked great. I was surprised. I thought that might be too many for this game, and it worked just as well as it did at 4, and if not being a little more interesting, in just seeing kind of the different strategies people employed. It worked just great at 5. I was surprised. Yeah.
Do you have a preferred play count, or...
4 is probably pretty good. I'd be curious to try it at 3 to see if it plays better, but 4 and 5 were both equally enjoyable to me. There wasn't a huge difference to me.
Huh. So one thing that I did kind of notice, and Matthew brought this up after our first play, and this was a frustration for him. I didn't share it as much, but I could see how some people might have a problem with this. And basically, it's this idea that with both the apprentices and the buildings, you're really at the mercy of the luck of what comes up. So the apprentice is a little bit less so because you see 8 of them at a time and you have some control over which ones you gain access to. Whereas with the buildings, they're just blind draws off the top. There's maybe a way to mitigate that if you go to one of the black market spaces, which lets you draw, I can't remember if it's 4 or 5, and keep 1. But for the most part, there is an aspect of this game where it's kind of dictating what you're doing. Do you think that's true to a certain extent?
I don't know if it's dictating what you're doing or forcing you to adjust on the fly. You certainly can't get too railroaded. I get what you're saying about how there's a certain degree of you can't control everything in this game. It's not a situation where you're grabbing a set of building card from a pile. You're stuck with what you draw. And even in cases, I had one in a late game in a 5-player game where late in that game, I drew 5 building cards and none of them had the thing I needed. Ooh. None of them had any of the resources that I had. It was late game enough that was a bummer. So even when you have chances for mitigation, it doesn't necessarily always work out for you. So, I'm trying to think that one through. I think the game forces you to adjust on the fly, not just because of other people roping you, not just because of the apprentices that come out, not just because of the buildings that come out. I think all of those factors kind of morph into this thing that to me feels tactical. Feels like something you have to adjust to on the fly rather than being something that's dumb luck and frustrating. I didn't feel this game was super luck driven.
And that's what me and Matthew were talking about, is that generally he prefers more strategic, less tactical. And I don't know that I necessarily prefer more tactical, but I enjoy tactical games. And
yes.
so I don't mind being nudged down a certain path based on what's more advantageous in the moment. But I think that if you if you're someone that is, not crazy about more tactical games, not that you won't like this necessarily, but it's just something to kind of keep in consideration.
Yeah, I get you. All right, let's talk about theme of this one, Sean. Did you feel this was a particularly thematic game?
Yeah, it really was. I mean, this was a pretty thematic midweight Euro, and it's weird. That's a weird thing. That doesn't happen a whole lot, and I think it all comes down to the policing action, the town center and the guardhouse, because for the most part, you send a worker to a forest, you get wood. Shocker, right? Like we've seen that 100 different times in worker placement games. But this idea of keeping these, bands of workers from a particular faction in check and kind of holding them hostage and selling them to the constabulary, selling them to the sheriff, whatever you want to call it, was really interesting. And it felt, I don't know, it really added to the thematic feel of this game. And then especially with like the valor, being a scoundrel or being very noble, and ways that would restrict what you could do or couldn't do. Going to the tax stand makes you lose 2 valor, for example. Going to the black market makes you lose valor. It was really interesting, and it did feel very thematic. I would say extraordinarily so for a midweight Euro.
Yeah, I would 100% agree. And I loved how with even some of the buildings, the effects of the buildings, you would feel the theme tied in. And sometimes you'd have to search for it for a second, but oftentimes it would be there. So for instance, the barracks, there's a building called the barracks. When you build the barracks, you either free everyone from jail or free everyone from other people's boards. I think it's one or the other. I don't think it's both. I may be wrong about that. And we're trying to think, how is that thematic? How is that tied in? Oh, they're getting recruited from either these holding cells or from jails or whatever into the military, is this idea. They're kind of getting conscripted, and they need every able body they can get. And so that's a good place to house them. The dungeon, when you build the dungeon, you lose valor immediately, and then you lose valor at the end of the game, but it's very valuable. Everyone needs a dungeon, but nobody likes you for having a dungeon. So the buildings feel thematic. The apprentices have a thematic feel for the most part, and the spaces, as you mentioned, the spaces themselves give that feel. Plus, it's just downright fun to go around. We called it roping people. It's more like a citizen's arrest, but I think just because of the icon, we called it roping people in to your own personal little Guantanamo Bays. It was engaging. It was really engaging, and I found the game very thematic. Yeah, absolutely.
So I'll take slight issue with what you said for the barracks. I think of it differently. I think you've built the barracks. You're assembling a strike force to go rescue the people.
Oh, that makes sense too. That could work too.
I think either interpretation's fine, and either interpretation leads itself to something thematic in your mind.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, mine's more right, but that's fine.
I like your explanation too, and your explanation is probably closer to what they might have meant. But in any case, the game through its gameplay, through how it's set up, inspires you to think that way. And has you think about that as part of the core gameplay, while still being a really enjoyable game as well. I love how well integrated it is. It works really well. So yeah, strongly thematic game. Sean Guild had a ton of thoughts on this one, an absolute ton of thoughts. Let's start with Evan. Evan says, I think this is certainly the most interesting game I've played in the Shem Phillips universe of Architects, Raiders, Explorers. But is it the best? People are raving about the prison mechanic of roping off workers to get money, which forces other players to unlock them. But I found that mechanic a bit over the top, as it really makes it hard to plan what you're doing. Even if you don't have a lot of people at a particular location, the risk of your workers getting snatched up unexpectedly is always present, and for me, tilts the balance of the game more toward tactical play than strategic. That lessens the enjoyment for me somewhat. I liked enough to rate it a 4, but given that rating means belongs in the duchy, and I wouldn't actually buy a copy for myself, I have to rate this a 3. That's interesting. That's the mechanic I actually think is the strongest in here, and maybe it's because I enjoy tactical play. I enjoy that it forces a wrench into things. It keeps people from over-planning and just having to stick to that plan and having the game feel like it can be over too early. It forces people to pick different paths, and I don't know. I appreciate that.
Jimmy DM90 only played it once, but he really enjoyed it. Probably a 5. Scoundrels of the West Kingdom may have been a more apt title, as the worker capturing mechanic seems like the most central aspect of Architects, as well as the thing that makes it most interesting. I felt less like an architect and more like a seedy slumlord getting people arrested on trumped-up charges. Still, it never felt personal when my guys got arrested. The theme of this game could have easily been switched to a mafia-themed game about the building of Vegas or about building speakeasies in gangland Chicago, especially the part about not paying taxes. I'd play that.
Definitely. Yeah, could definitely get a good retheme. Ian Kissel says, I have played Architects of the West Kingdom a few times now. The art and graphic design is excellent as always with Shem's games. I appreciate that it's a twist on the worker placement genre and that there are a lot of different ways you can approach the game based on the cards you take. That said, I'm not really a big fan of the game. When people capture your workers, it's like throwing a wrench in your engine and it comes grinding to a halt. That would be okay if you could choose to power up the different action spaces or not, but since you have to put a person down to activate it, thus making it more likely they'll be captured every time you go to a space you need in order to execute your strategy, it'll move you closer to having your engine wrecked. It's a fine game and more interesting than many worker placement games, but not one I would play unless someone wants to, a Ducal 3. And his thoughts on that certainly has me think it's less of a Matthew game. And I thought that you wouldn't like this one as much as you did, Sean, and I'm interested to see your final score, but it's probably going to be a little higher than I would have imagined. So
Sylvain Lacroix says, first of all, I will say that I really liked Raiders of the North Sea, a simple worker placement game with a special twist on the genre that made it very interesting. Architects uses the same idea. Take a common mechanism like worker placement and put a nice and original twist on it. This time, we can add workers to the spots and generate more of the reward. Very clever, and it creates very interesting gameplay elements that made this game pretty good. Pretty good. It's probably in my top 3 of 2018 games. The game feels simple enough to be accessible and also offers interesting choices that will please the gamers. It is a great game and will get a 5 on the Ducal scale. And I will say, the ease with which I was able to teach this, Alex, I mean, I thought it was just easy to teach, easy to pick up. So it's pretty solid in that respect.
Yeah, no doubt. I wouldn't call it gateway, but it's definitely not as tricky to get into as some people would have you think. Francois Mali says, this is a unique twist on the worker placement, and the fast playing time make for a medium weight that's easy to pick up. The mechanics are simple and fun, but the strategies are numerous enough, so it's always interesting. The debt mechanic might be a little underdeveloped or underused, but it's probably my only negative with the game. Great game, a solid 5 on the Ducal scale. And I will say this, debt could maybe be just a little more punishing, and it might be more interesting in that game. I don't know if you think that 2 points is enough there, Sean.
It's expensive. I mean, it's expensive to get rid of, and there's not a lot of ways to really benefit from it. Like, I think there's only 2 cards in all of the apprentices that benefit from you paying off debt. What we hadn't really talked about was, in fact, how quick this game was. I mean, it was snappy. It was fast. I mean, we were probably playing 4 players in an hour and a half. 3 players, I think, was a little under an hour. Like, it is a quick game, and it packs a good amount of gameplay into that. And then finally, Chad Jacobson says, after about 4 or 5 plays, it was a much better idea in theory than a game for us. None of the spots gave the player anything all that interesting to do, and the more powerful actions aren't very exciting. I'm going to go here and get a wood. I'll go here again and get 2 wood. Now I'm going to get 3 wood. And the prisoner mechanism was kind of like a ho-hum press your luck mechanism that gets in the way of long-term planning. Oh, you're rounding up my guys now? Okay. The pushing endgame before others were ready to bring up their virtue a bit or get rid of loans offered some interest, but it could fall into a race game, which is not my thing. A Ducal 3.
Well, Sean, what is your score for this? I have a feeling you're going to be higher than a 3 on this one.
Well, you're incorrect.
What?
Yeah, it's a 3.
What on earth is going on with you in this scale?
No, and
for the record, wait, just for folks listening, we recorded the double take first, and there's another moment in the double take that you're going to hear after this that I have a similar reaction to. Sean, this is going to have to take a really beefy explanation.
Okay, so we review things on a 6-point scale here at the Duke's Dice. 1 is poorly designed but playable, not necessarily fun. 6 is an all-time favorite that's a contender for the top 10. So I'm giving this a 3. Game is okay, not exciting, will play in the right situation. Compare that to a 4, which Alex thinks I should be giving this. A good game, worth playing, just not all the time, belongs in the duchy. And I get your frustration, Alex, because the way I was talking about this, it probably did sound like I was going to wind up at a 4. Absolutely. I think I have a tremendous respect for this game because it does do a lot of really interesting things. But everything that Chad just said is kind of how I felt during all of my plays of the game. There were certainly, I enjoyed the plays and I enjoyed this game and I will happily play it again. But it's not a game that I'm going to bother to teach to Raquel. It's not a game that I'm going to suggest when we're trying to come up with something to play. There are so many better midweight Euros, and the worker placement with a twist doesn't quite do enough for me. Now, if you had that worker placement with a twist, and I wasn't so down on the policing action that say Chad was. I liked it because it did make for more of a tactical experience. But the resource gathering wasn't all that interesting. Turning it into buildings wasn't all that interesting. The way you were playing the game mechanically was interesting, but what you were doing with those mechanics wasn't necessarily interesting. And I think this is probably a good jumping off point for another game that uses this type of worker placement aspect to do something a little bit more interesting.
Where was any of that during the review?
I have tremendous respect for this design. I think it is a very solid design, and I think that if you are much higher on midweight Euros than I am, I think you're going to really enjoy this game.
In a vacuum, which of these fits better? Game is okay or a good game?
Well, if we're talking about experience, Alex.
Answer the question, Sean.
Game is okay. Game is okay.
Oh man.
Because while I like the underlying mechanic, I don't like what I'm doing with the mechanic. Or it's not that I don't like it, it's just that it's not as interesting.
I think if you listen to your own review,
I hear what you're saying.
It's all right, that's fine.
And here's the thing, it's a very high 3, and I almost talked myself into the review or into the 4, but I'm not gonna have played this again next year when the double take comes up.
I think there's a good chance I will have played this.
I think so.
Yeah, and to be clear, this is a definition of a 5 for me. High 5, not quite a 6, but a 5. A great game will rarely turn out a play of it. I'm not going to kick this thing out of bed for eating pretzels. This game that's not a very useful metaphor in this circumstance. Anyway,
so is this Architects my board game?
I don't own a copy, but I might seek one out. This is a stellar game from the production to it, to the thematic feel of it, to the interesting roping mechanism, to the fact that it doesn't take a ton of time. It's decently easy to teach. It's an incredibly satisfying game. A game I'm absolutely terrible at, but a game I will happily play again and again, and I'm pretty sure I'll play it again sometime in the next year. If I'm at a convention and you see me and you want to play a game with me, this is a fine one. I'm happy to teach. I'm happy to play. I think Garfield and Renegade, it's a tremendous game. It's a really, really well done one. And I didn't feel as high about, say, Raiders of the North Sea. I didn't dig that one quite as much as I dig this one. But I think it's just really well done and a really satisfying experience on just about all levels. There's some very, very minor quibbles I have with it. But honestly, if I'd given this one a 6, it wouldn't have surprised me. High 5, I think, is pretty fair, though, for where this thing will settle in. So a high 5, a great game will really turn out a play of it. So that's our review of Architects of the West Kingdom. Sean with a trolling Alex, I think, 3 and a 5 for me.
You are listening to the Dukes of Dice, proud members of the Dice Tower Network. For other great shows in the network, check out dicetowernetwork.com. Back to Alex and Sean for this week's Dukes Double Take.
All right, finally, we have our Dukes Double Take. We're going to look back at episode 171, Smog of Love, where we reviewed Fog of Love. And I made no bones about it. Everyone knew going into this what I was going to give it, and I did not disappoint. I gave this thing a straight 6. I was absolutely in love with this game. Sean, you were a little more on the fence. It was a little hot and cold with you. You gave this one at the time a probational 4. You said at the time that you needed to play this one with Raquel, and you also said, though, that you desperately wanted to play this with me at a convention, which, given that we didn't see each other the rest of the year and still haven't seen each other in person since, because I haven't been home and you haven't been at a convention, that didn't happen. So, Sean, have you played this game since? Oh, wait a minute. I forgot Dan King's back. Hey, Dan, welcome back.
Yes, and I haven't played it since, but I have played it many times, but I have not played it since.
Okay. Now played it since you reviewed it, when you reviewed it. All right. Excellent. Sorry, Sean, let me go back to you. Have you played it since?
I have indeed. I did manage to get to play in with Raquel, and we had a lot of fun with it. I know there's been some discussion about how, for some people, like couples shouldn't play this because it could create some situations or things can get too real. We had a lot of fun with it. I really enjoyed it. I gave it a probational 4. I'm gonna put it at a 3. So probational 4 is a good game worth playing. Just when all the time belongs in the duchy. 3, what I'm giving it is game is okay, not exciting, while playing the right situation. That's absolutely what it needs to be for me, Alex.
That's where I'm at too. But for me, it didn't change because I didn't get to play it again. But that's me. It's a 3 for me as well.
Like it has its place. So if I do come out to St. Louis for St. Louis Gaming.
Geekway to the West.
Geekway to the West. There we go.
Come on, man. It's Gateway to the West, and then you just changed a part of the word.
That's fine. We'll play it, and I'm happy. So here's the thing: it's staying in my collection for now. Ooh, is it? Because you know what? Saturday we have a Gamers Garage sale at Empire, and I've got like 80 games ready to go. No, I think it's going to stay, which normally would make it a 4. I think I'm keeping it. Just because I feel like your head's going to explode right now. Like if I were to say and mean it that the mind is not a game, I feel like your head would explode and you would just lose your crap right now because no one can see what Alex is doing in our Skype call. He is flipping out. He is so frustrated. It's like I kicked his puppy. Is what
I don't have a puppy.
I know.
I have no puppies.
If you had a puppy and I kicked it, is how
I don't.
Okay.
I don't have a puppy.
Actually, I think if I kicked your puppy, you would not be responding appropriately. I think you should be more outraged and like calling the police. But that's
How
fine.
about you don't kick my puppy that I don't have?
Hey, remind me, is Abby your girlfriend or my girlfriend? Because I get confused on this point.
I'm not going to spur this up. This was a hot topic on the guild over the course of this past week, so I'm not going to even get into that. I'm not even going to justify any of that with anything.
Look, I enjoy it, and I will be happy to play it once a year. The reality is Raquel and I have a very similar taste in games. We tend to gravitate towards the heavier stuff. And when given the opportunity to play, we're not going to play Fog of Love. But I think that it does something that's so unique and is so different. I'm saying the same thing, but there's nothing out there quite like it. And the way that it creates this narrative and the way that it's doing the storytelling, I think is really incredible. Like it's really good, but it's just not something I'm going to enjoy doing all that often. But I absolutely think, Alex, you and I play this game and it's going to be a blast. Like it's like the experience is just going to be killer. And I think part of it is you prioritize the experiential factor of games more than I do. The way a game makes you feel is more important for you than it is for me.
I want to let Dan jump in with his thoughts before I absolutely tear into to your score of this.
Jeez, sorry for my opinion, man.
I kind of agree with a lot of he said, which is, it's definitely a unique experience. There's no other game like it, for sure. And actually, the best part about that game was the very unique way that they teach you the game with the tutorial. The way the cards are all the same way, like we're in a very pre-packed way, and you learn how to play the game, and the rules come up, and that was awesome. I want to see more games do that. So the game had definitely some interesting things. It just, for me, I found myself coming away from what the game wanted you to do, which was get lost in the theme, get lost in the character part, kind of like role play a little bit. And all I was doing was looking at the abstracted part of the game and looking at which way I wanted these color arrows to go. And I felt like that's what I ended up doing, even though that's not really what you're supposed to be feeling in the game.
Man, Dan, we're drifting apart. All we have holding us together still is Baseball Highlights 2045. That's all we have, because I don't get it.
Hey, man,
that's all we need. You, me, and Mike together forever. All right. So let me talk. I have played this one since, by the way, and to explain kind of my continued love for this. First of all, it helps that Abby also loves this game. Big fan. It helps that I think she played this game post-review with me, and I showed it to her, and it's typically heavier than a game she would enjoy. But she got really into the theme, and at the very end, she pulled a heartbreaker on me. She broke my character's heart without me knowing it was coming. It was perfect. It was beautifully timed. It was an amazing gaming moment, and I still remember it happening. So the fact that this game has forged those kind of memories, and I may have played this game with, I don't remember if this was before the review or after the review, but I played it with my buddy Josh at work, and he was playing as a chocolatier, and there was a card that came up that our relationship was rocky anyway. I think I was Tex or something, and I was a lifeguard. And our relationship was going so badly that I had messed something up, made something so socially awkward at a party that his character was forced to quit professions and go from being a chocolatier to an elevator repair technician. Those kind of moments in that game have me continually remember it, have me want to go back to it, have me love it. And I get what you're saying, Dan, about maybe getting into the scoring more. I think there's something there for everyone in a sense. You can approach this thing as a pure game and find some of that interesting and trying to maneuver the social situation, or you can get lost in the story. And I frequently do get lost in the story of this. I actually don't care if I win or lose. I care about telling a good story here. Now back to Mr. Ramirez.
Well, hold on. Before you lay into me for having my own free will and thoughts, we should have done this sooner. Explain what Fog of Love is for people who may not be familiar.
I mean, come on, just look it up, people. Whatever. No.
Wow.
Fog of Love is a romantic comedy board game where you are playing out a relationship. You are two parts of a couple. Game doesn't care if it's two men, two women, man and a woman, doesn't matter. And you are going to play these situation cards, these scene cards each round, and then your partner is going to react to it. And it's a cooperative, competitive, semi-cooperative kind of game where you can win together, you can lose together, one can win, one can lose. You have these different traits that you're trying to fulfill that represent who your character is as a person and your goals within the relationship. And the closer the relationship is to your goals at the end, usually the better things are going. That enough of a good summary?
Yeah, no, that's great. Good job. Way to go.
Okay. Sean Ramirez, attorney at law.
Oh, jeez. Yep.
Belongs in the duchy. You are still going to keep a copy of this in your collection.
Because I feel like if I get rid of it, it's going to break your heart.
No, I won't. Why would I? I don't care what you own or don't own.
Yeah, a little bit.
It doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect me. It doesn't affect me one bit. But under the very nature of the scale, the fact that you are continuing to own it, that you still want to get additional plays in of it, defies what a 4 would typically be.
Okay, great. I'll put it in the pile and get rid of it on Saturday. Boom.
Fine,
problem solved.
do it. Okay. I don't think you're going to do that.
I will. I'm going to do it. Scout's honor. It backfired on you, Alex.
No, it didn't backfire. I don't care if you sell it or not.
Don't put my back up against the wall, Alex. That's when I come out fighting.
I'm going to have Matthew verify if you actually sold this thing or not.
By all means. I will sign something. I will sign an affidavit. I'll get it notarized. And I will post it on the guild.
Excellent. But truly, your heart is really at a 4, and you're just saying a 3 to annoy me.
No, I'm really not. I'm really not. Because, again, I don't think I'm going to play it with Raquel. We're not going to play it again. I think I only want to play this game with you, Alex. Is that so terrible?
Aww.
Is that so bad?
Guys,
oh, that's so sweet.
This is getting really awkward just to watch this weird relationship just train wreck into the shiplap wall.
Now,
nice callback.
Now I will say this. The guild is far more in alignment with you, Sean, than it is with me.
Shocker.
This is a situation where the 15-85% divide is absolutely laid bare and made perfectly clear. I'm on an island on this one, I believe. But let's see what the guild had to say. So Saxmam says, Saxmam, by the way, being a Dan King fan favorite for the sax. Anyway,
yeah.
I finally got Fog of Love off of the shelf of shame recently and played 3 games split between 2 different opponents. I guess I'm not the role-playing kind because I enjoyed watching the reviews more than I did playing the game, which is now on the shelf of Board Game Garage Sale, where apparently Sean's copy will soon be as well. At least I refrain from buying the expansions before playing the base game. Sax Ma'am, down on the game.
And then Christopher John said, I've played this game in several different contexts with my family, friends, etc., and I've enjoyed it each time. I found that it takes a little imagination and a willingness to give yourself over to the story in order to maximize the experience. Some people I tried it with were too focused on figuring out the puzzle and winning, and they generally were not huge fans. Not surprisingly, those familiar with tabletop RPGs got the most enjoyment out of it, though they wished it was more story-driven. For me, though, this game successfully balances a fun storytelling element with solid gameplay. Plus, the production quality of this game is absolutely top-notch. A high 4 for me on the Ducal scale. And so here's what I'll say, and I remember this from the review, is for me, it was not a good balance of the storytelling and the gameplay. It made me wanting either more storytelling or more gameplay. So, like, it wanted me to play, like, a real full-blown storytelling game like Fiasco or a more mechanically driven game like any other game.
Fair enough. Steve Paltrineri says, I was pretty excited to try this one, especially after Alex's glowing review, and it was glowing. After a few plays, I found it to be just okay. The mechanics are fine, but it's just really easy to win. Maybe we got lucky when we played and didn't have goals that were complete opposites from each other, but it's pretty easy early on to see what areas a person is trying to work toward and help them reach their goals. Maybe we're not role-playing as much as we should, and maybe winning isn't really the point. But it's still a game, and as a game, I just didn't find much challenge here. I give it a low 3, bordering on a 2. Ooh. I'll play it again if my buddy is really anxious to get it out again, because I did have fun, but I'll never suggest it, and doubt he will either. And I will say, Steve sounds like he's kind of in the Sean camp in terms of thoughts on this. I will definitely say that it is not about the winning. If you're coming into this game trying to win the relationship or end in a situation where both you and your partner in the game are satisfied, I think it's not necessarily playing into the story of the game. And I think what the game is asking you to do is to embrace the story. But I can get how as a competitive, I want to win or I want to cooperate with you to win kind of game, I can get how it's not quite as satisfying maybe. I don't know.
So I will say this. I think it's right in that you don't want to win a relationship. There's no such thing as winning a relationship. But there is such a thing as winning a breakup. And that's huge. You always want to win the breakup. That's all I'm going to say.
I wonder who's going to win between your breakup. The way you guys are going at it.
It's okay. He's a lawyer.
Matthew's kind of been making some good points recently that the mind is more of an activity than a game.
Oh, my goodness. See, Dan, he just says this kind of thing to hurt me. He's just saying these kind of things to hurt me.
I'm on your side, Alex, on this one.
Thank you.
No, I love the game. I think, or the mind. Wait, the mind. Yes, I love the mind.
I'm okay with the game. The mind is amazing.
The mind is a game. It's a game. It's fine. It's fine.
Dan, have you played Wavelength yet, by the way?
No.
So I haven't played it either, but the Kickstarter has me pretty obsessed because they've been playing pretty well on Kickstarter. It's a Wolfgang Warsch game. Anyway, completely off topic. Check it out. It's Wavelength. Cool.
I must.
Well, that's going to do it for the Duke's Double Take. It goes from a probational 4 to a 3 for Sean, perhaps very unfairly, and stays at a 6 for Alex. Dan also gave it a 3, though, because he agrees with Sean, and broke my heart as well. Well, all right. That brings us to the end of the episode. But before we go, the rest of the top 6 names. First up, Nick Hayes with Kingdom Hearts, referencing Dan King, referencing Fog of Love, and of course the kingdom in Architects of the West Kingdom. Not bad. But also copyright infringement, and we can't use it.
The next one is from Andrew Capish, and it's Building Relationships. Interesting twist there on building the kingdom and the way I do with my board games, the gaming on purpose, and growing relationships through board games. Very good one. He definitely is a fan of mine, that's for sure.
I can tell you that this episode has really built the relationship between Sean and myself.
You're so salty.
You're salty.
I'm not salty. I'm happy-go-lucky. Brian Smith suggested Careless Whisper, the Wham song. Wham! Where are those Wham boys? They've been up to no good. What am I missing there with Careless Whisper? What am I missing?
So I had to pull this up. This is one that I copied over that I pulled in because it has a good explanation behind it. So Fog of Love, Careless Whisper is one of the all-time classic love songs, lamentation of lost love through foolish acts. Dan King's Sax Serenade, well, of course, Careless Whisper is absolutely famous for its sax song. And Architects of the West Kingdom, referencing Wham. Wham's an English band, and England sure looks like the inspiration for the setting of the West Kingdom. So there you go. That's where you get Careless Whisper.
I am exhausted from that journey.
Well, I'm going to do the next one because this was one of my favorites from Kyle Kelly. Crazy Little King Called Love. That's a nice twist on the crazy little thing called love. So that was one of my favorites. I've kind of voted for that as a tie with the one that ended up actually winning the name of the podcast. This one's great.
Yeah, that one's a really good one, for sure. And finally, a collaboration between Nick Hayes and the Namefather. Two evil guild supervillains team up to become one to come up with the name Don't Squeeze the Charlemagne. I like that one.
That's toilet paper reference, right?
Of course, yeah, Don't Squeeze the Charmin.
Don't Squeeze the Charmin. Yeah, I like it. Because Architects of the West Kingdom is based in Carolingian history, right?
I don't know.
Anyway, that's going to do it. Dan King, Game Boy Geek, thanks for coming on the show, buddy.
Thanks for having me. This is always fun. You need to have me on some other time.
What are we going to play in Arizona when I come to Arizona? You're already in Arizona.
Maybe we could play Escape Plan. Maybe I could play this campaign trail with you. We'll see.
Yeah, that sounds fun.
Campaign trail would be fun. You want to make sure President Sean never happens.
Exactly.
I sense some skullduggery on the campaign trail.
Yeah, I'm going to think about that for a little bit. Sounds nice. All right, well, that's going to do it then for episode 196, Fog-itects of the West, King Dan. Thanks again to Baker Mitchell for that awesome episode title. Until next time, this is Sean.
And Alex.
And Dan. Beat you again, Alex.
What? I mixed it up. You can't. No. Hey.
And Duke you later, everybody.
Thank you so much for listening to The Dukes of Dice. Today's episode was recorded in the Duchy on February 28th, 2019. Our theme music provided by Carbohydro M from his Prime Legacy album. The Dukes of Dice are a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. For other great board gaming podcasts, check out dicetowernetwork.com. And for all the latest in the Duchy, go to dukesofdice.com. Find us on Twitter at Dukes of Dice. Join in conversations on our Board Game Geek Guild. Find us on Facebook and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thanks to our sponsors, Tasty Minstrel Games, Arcane Wonders, and Game Toppers, LLC. You can learn more about Tasty Minstrel's titles at playtmg.com, Arcane Wonders games at arcanewonders.com, and learn all you need to know about Berkey, who is celebrating a birthday as we record this, at GameToppersLLC.com. We'll see you back here in 2 weeks. Until then, game on!
All right, guys, I need a nice, clean Albuquerque off. Dan, you have the option of going first or second as the guest.
Second.
Oh, right, this is nonsense. I cry foul, but
I'm the home team.
You're the home team. How am I not the home team on my own podcast?
No. To be fair, Arizona is closer to New Mexico than Missouri is.
That's right.
Well, my home address is in Missouri, and the podcast home address is somewhere in the average between Albuquerque and Missouri.
I don't know about that. At all.
Okay.
Do you have a Dukes of Dice game night, Alex? No, I don't. Hey, what are the rules for the Albuquerque off? I decide.
Oh, well, this is already completely unfair. I lobby for a new job.
I will be objective, impartial, and fair.
No, you won't.
But
you're not going to be any of those things. You're going to be a zero of those things.
Well, hey, why would you insult the judge? Don't insult the judge.
Hey, you're a terrible judge, and you're going to do a bad job.
Address me as Your Honor. Your Honor.
Your Honor, you suck.
Listen,
Your Honor.
this is space court, Alex.
So are you just gonna read the paragraph coming in?
No, I was just gonna just do an Albuquerque. I don't know. I can do the paragraph.
Coming to you from the Duchy.
Yeah,
in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico.
Sean, you gotta leave this whole part in.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh yeah, 100%. No, this is definitely going in unedited. Here we go. All right, getting the pipes ready. It's been a long time. Now wait, Sean, is this being judged on duration? Is this being judged on volume? What is this being judged on?
It's being judged on my whim.
Oh boy. Well, I'm already going to lose.
It's the best. I'm looking at the totality of all of them.
All right, here we go. And do I have to say New Mexico after the Albuquerque?
Give me for the Dungeon of the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico. It's the Dukes of Dice. There. End with Dukes of Dice.
Okay, got it. All right.
The whole sentence.
Well, I'd be leaving out a part of that sentence.
Okay, without that last portion. Dukes of Dice. I just knocked you a point, by the way.
You've docked me so many points, probably for insulting you.
Don't worry,
and
it's out of a million
also
points.
for being me.
It's out of a million points, so it's
that's
nominal.
good. Oh, this is all very fair. All right.
I've got a whole rubric here that I'm judging this on.
So I'm debating whether to go duration here or to go intensity. I'm not sure what to do here. All right,
dude. Alex is shaking in his boots. This is awesome.
Dan's about to win by default.
I wish they could see this on video. Alex is sweating, man.
Oh man, I need to get a mop over here.
Take your jacket off, Alex. You look all warm.
No, I'm good. I need this.
The fact that he's nervous at all makes me feel good.
I need this. Here we go. Now, Sean, what are the criteria of this again?
Oh, my goodness. Like I said, Dan's going to win by default. No, by Dan fault.
By Dan fault. One by Dan fault. Coming to you from the Duchy of the Duke City. Ow! Okay, I lost it. I can't do this.
Wow.
This is bad.
Okay, so Dan.
No, wait. I'm going to try again. I want to redo. I want to redo. Coming to you from the Duchy of the New City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, it's the Dukes of Dice.
All right. Are you happy with that?
No, I'm not happy with that, but Dan's going to win anyway.
Okay. All right.
Dan King?
What, you're not going to do... What? I thought you were going to ask for a third take.
That's what he got. That's what he gets. He's good.
Okay. All right, ready? I don't even have any water, man. This is going to be terrible. Ready?
Who's stalling
Let's
now?
do it.
Man.
I know. Coming to you from the Duchy in the Duke City, Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the gateway city, St. Louis, Missouri. It's the Dukes of Dice, a podcast about board, card, and occasionally role-playing games. Today, the Dukes are joined by special guest Dan King, the Game Boy Geek, who's going to spank the pants off Alex at his own intro. Bam! That just happened.
So here's what you didn't think, Alex. You didn't think you were thinking inside the box.
I was thinking inside the box.
And Dan thought outside the box.
And I apologize for everybody who listens to that because my mic clipped like 8 times, even though I pulled away from it. So I apologize in the editing bay for that one.
No, but you see, that's why Dan gets paid the big bucks. Sean, you don't even need to judge this. Dan just won.
I think we should let the guild judge this.
Oh, okay. Okay, I'll post a thread up there. I'll see how that goes. I don't think it'll be great.
Alex is so fired.
The guild already hates me anyway, so ugh.
All right.
you should see Alex's face on the video. This is perfect.
Awesome. Well, bye, Dan. Thanks for the help.
Get the hell out of here, Dan.
Thanks for letting me kick his butt. I'll talk to you guys later.